Module 1, Auto Industry Beginnings. Once upon a time, the idea of zooming down a road in a self-propelled vehicle was pure fantasy. Today, it's second nature. How did we get from there to here? Buckle up for a wild ride through the beginnings of the auto industry. It all revved up in Germany with a fellow named Carl Benz. While many mistakenly attribute the invention of the gas-powered automobile to Henry Ford, it was Benz who pioneered this revolutionary feat. In 1885, Benz managed to successfully test drive a curious vehicle, which would later be known as the motorwagen. Interestingly, it had only 3 wheels, a tricycle of sorts for the grown-ups. Ford's contribution came later, and while monumental, it wasn't the inception. Across the Atlantic, the United States wasn't about to be left in the dust. Several visionaries sought to put America on wheels. Among them were the Doria brothers. Charles Doria and his brother Frank didn't just build cars, they showed them off. Racing became their method of choice to gain a reputation. And boy, did they speed past expectations. Their success on the racing circuit garnered attention, admiration, and, most importantly, buyers. Meanwhile, in the city known for its musical rhythm, Detroit, a different kind of rhythm was taking shape, the rhythmic hum of car engines. Establishing Detroit as a car manufacturing epicenter was Ransom Olds. Before Ford set up shop in the Motor City, Olds was already producing his famous curved dash runabout. And for those not fluent in vintage car lingo, this referred to an early automobile style with a charming rounded front, quite the eye-catcher of its time. Speaking of catching eyes, Henry Ford definitely caught more than a few. However, it's worth noting that the Dodge brothers were the hidden geniuses behind Ford's first car engine. Ford's main achievement wasn't being the first to produce a car, but rather mastering the art of mass production. His assembly line method drastically reduced costs and increased efficiency, making cars affordable for many Americans. Yet, what's interesting about the early American automakers, including Oldsmobile and Ford, was their keenness to outsource. They realized that while they were good at some things, they weren't good at everything. Enterprising suppliers, seeing the gold mine, began producing components. Some even pivoted from supplying parts to making their own cars. Though, not all of them, like DeSoto, made it big in the earliest days. As we race through this history, one must not forget the romance of the open road. Nowhere is this more evident than with the Oldsmobile. This car was not just a machine, it was a cultural phenomenon. It became synonymous with romance, thanks to a catchy tune that went, "Come away with me Lucille in my merry Oldsmobile." Talk about brand placement, right? The auto industry's start as a mosaic of innovations, challenges, races, and yes, a bit of song and dance. From Benz's tricycle to Detroit's roaring engines, it's been one heck of a ride. And remember, while cars have changed, and now most have 4 wheels, the spirit of innovation and romance remains. So next time you're on the road, maybe hum a little tune for old time's sake. Ford's auto industry evolutions. In the early 20th century, when horses ruled the streets and carriages were the epitome of transportation, there emerged a visionary named Henry Ford. He didn't invent the automobile, but he certainly set it on a path to ubiquity. Ford's revolution lay not just in making cars, but in fundamentally changing how they were made. Location, location, location. The early automakers, ever astute, didn't set up their production facilities just anywhere. They chose locations close to natural resources, most notably Detroit, Michigan, which was abundant in the necessary raw materials. This strategic decision wasn't inspired by the charm of nearby universities or the allure of political powerhouses. The decision was rooted in practicality. Being closer to resources meant less transportation cost and faster production timelines. Finance hubs, for all their glitter and gold, couldn't offer this tangible advantage. The car makers were in the business of metal and rubber, not stocks and bonds. The curious case of Henry Leland. Henry Leland, an entrepreneur with an eye for detail and quality, had an indelible impact on the American auto industry. Initiating the Cadillac line, he set a gold standard, metaphorically speaking, in luxury. Not one to rest on his laurels, Leland went on to kickstart the Lincoln line, further emphasizing his commitment to craftsmanship. And while he did produce transmissions for Oldsmobile, one thing he didn't do? Sell a so-called Leland line to Ford. That, dear readers, is the stuff of myths. Inspiration in unlikely places. Ransom Olds. Ransom Olds, while perhaps less of a household name today, carved out a significant slice of auto history with his own innovations. Olds had a vision, a car that John Doe could afford without auctioning off his livestock. He also had an ambition for a production process that outpaced the competition. Ford, always the keen observer, took notes. By aligning with Olds' philosophy of affordable vehicles and ramping up production capabilities, Ford further solidified his position in the industry. Taylor versus Ford. The Tale of Two Titans. Enter Frederick Winslow Taylor, the brainy theorist who penned the principles of scientific management. Taylor was a man obsessed with efficiency. How could one make workers more productive? That was the question that kept him up at night. He believed that with enough scrutiny and a sprinkle of science, every task could be optimized. But while Taylor's theories sang the praises of efficiency, Ford was orchestrating the symphony. Ford's assembly line was revolutionary, and it's debated whether Taylor, with all his genius, could have conceptualized it. Even if Taylor had a similar idea, he might have lacked the practical sensibility that Ford possessed in spades. Interestingly, despite their aligned values, Ford never cited Taylor as an influence. Perhaps he was too busy revolutionizing an industry to catch up on his reading. Ford's golden goose, the $5 a day plan. Henry Ford, in another stroke of genius, figured out a simple economic truth: well-paid workers are also consumers. Ford's decision to offer a $5 a day wage was radical for its time. But Ford wasn't just being generous. He foresaw that by putting more money in the pockets of his workers, they would be more inclined to buy his cars. In essence, Ford was investing in his own consumer base. This initiative did more than just boost sales. It motivated workers, reduced turnover, and fostered loyalty. However, it's worth noting that this wage strategy was not a veiled attempt to offer auto financing, nor was it purely altruistic. By keeping wages high and union influence low, Ford ensured smoother operations for his empire. American automakers, rise and fall. In the sprawling tale of the American automobile industry, the Big Three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, have cast long shadows, often overshadowing a myriad of smaller automakers that once vied for a slice of the American dream. Some met their end in dramatic fashion, while others quietly faded into obscurity. And through their stories, we gain invaluable insights into the dynamics of corporate success and failure. The Dodge brothers and the unintended entry into car manufacturing. Horace and John Dodge began their automotive careers supplying parts to Oldsmobile and Ford. Their factory hummed with activity, churning out components that found their way into the engines and chassis of some of the earliest American cars. However, suspicions arose when the duo began experimenting with their own vehicle designs. As they rolled out their own car in 1914, many in the industry felt blindsided. Hadn't they just been a supplier? Their transition from suppliers to full-fledged car manufacturers is akin to a modern battery supplier for electric vehicles deciding to build its own EV. Talk about shocking. In 1916, Dodge earned its durability stripes when a U.S. Army expedition showcased the resilience of Dodge vehicles. The famed George Patton and his troops used 3 Dodges in America's first motorized military operation against the forces of the Mexican bandit, Pancho Villa. It's said that Patton dramatically strapped the bodies of 3 vanquished enemies to the hoods, parading them back to his commander, John J. Pershing. From that point, Dodge was not just any car, it was a powerhouse, a force to be reckoned with. The Thunderbird, a car, a song, a legend. In contrast to the gritty origins of Dodge, Ford's Thunderbird tapped into post-war America's glitzy dreams. Introduced in 1955, the Thunderbird became emblematic of the good life. While it didn't engage in any Pancho Villa-style pursuits, it gained a different sort of fame. By the 1960s, the Beach Boys were crooning about it, capturing the sun-kissed, California vibe. Then, in 1973, the Thunderbird became a star in George Lucas' American Graffiti. Set in 1962, the film celebrated the T-Bird as an emblem of youthful rebellion and hot rod innocence. Thus, while Dodge's reputation was forged in the heat of battle, the Thunderbird was immortalized in the shimmering glow of pop culture. Ford's brush with bankruptcy. The latter half of the 20th century was tumultuous for many automakers. By the 2000s, even the mighty Big Three were feeling the heat. GM and Chrysler would go on to declare bankruptcy, but Ford took a different route. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't the Taurus leading a cavalry charge against Japanese rivals that saved them. Nor did they dive headfirst into truck production, or frantically merge with Nissan and Renault. Ford's salvation came through a combination of foresight and belt-tightening. The company astutely mortgaged all its assets in 2006, raising a war chest of $23.6 billion. This move, coupled with shedding excess brands and cutting production, kept Ford afloat while its competitors were sinking. General Motors' rise to dominance. The automobile. That beautiful, smoke-belching, gasoline-gulping creature that has captured the hearts and wallets of millions. No story about its American history is complete without discussing General Motors. This is the tale of how GM grew from a hodgepodge of car brands to an empire, outshining its rivals, including the mighty Ford. In the early 20th century, as cars replaced horses and buggies, competition among manufacturers was fierce. GM's genius move? Instead of just producing one type of car, they conglomerated several brands, each with its distinct customer base. You see, the logic was simple: why dominate one market when you can dominate all of them? Remember the opulent Packard Twin 6? No? Well, the fact that Tsar Nicholas II had one in his garage should tell you something about its clientele. Hint, they probably didn't shop for bargains. That's right, while the Model T was busy making cars affordable for everyone, the Packard Twin 6 was reserved for the creme de la creme of society. And speaking of the elite, let's dive into a bit about Harley Earl. The man was all about style. Before joining GM, Earl had a reputation for producing some of the most exquisite custom car bodies. Imagine if haute couture and automobiles had a baby. That's what Earl was all about. Given this background, it would be no exaggeration to say that he would have been right at home at Packard in the 1910s. After all, Packard was known for its artisanal production approach, emphasizing beauty, style, and luxury. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Now, let's switch gears to GM during the 1930s, a tumultuous time when the world was grappling with the Great Depression. Many businesses were going belly up, but GM? They had an ace up their sleeve, the styling department, led by none other than Harley Earl. Both Pontiac and LaSalle, two of GM's brands, were facing the bleak prospect of extinction due to plummeting sales. Enter Earl with his captivating designs that not only resonated with the public but also reinvigorated these brands. Imagine being in the boardroom when Earl unveiled his designs. The collective sigh of relief must have been audible, but Earl's influence extended beyond GM's walls. Take the 1936 Cord 810, for instance. While this particular design was not Earl's baby, the person behind it had worked under Earl's tutelage. It's almost like seeing your protege win an award, right? But here's the catch: the Cord 810 lacked a grille. To Earl, who believed the grille or face of the car was paramount, this would have been unthinkable. It's a bit like Picasso saying, "Who needs symmetry, anyway?" GM's resilience during the Great Depression, its forward-thinking strategies, and the unparalleled visionaries like Harley Earl in its ranks ensured its dominance over competitors. The company didn't merely adapt, it led the way, setting trends and reshaping the automobile industry landscape.